Did you know African American men and men with a family history are at higher risk of being diagnosed with prostate cancer? It is the second leading cause of cancer deaths in men in the U.S. There are usually no early warning signs with prostate cancer, which is why it is important to know your risk and talk to your doctor about whether prostate cancer testing is right for you. Early detection is key. Make an appointment with your doctor today. For more information on prostate cancer, visit urologyhealth.org. This message was brought to you by the Urology Care Foundation.
This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen. With Chris Clark.
The 2007 South Carolina class was, at that time, 6th in the country and 4th in the SEC, which is amazing.
Wes Mitchell.
You know, I think if you're South Carolina, you're aiming to at least be at 50%. Then in theory, you're adding talent, you're getting better, you're putting yourself in a position to compete.
And Tyler Head.
It's been a great week for South Carolina. On the recruiting front, still certainly plenty to talk about.
On the home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Wes Mitchell joining me on the Love Chevrolet phone lines out of the studio today. Wes, obviously we've been talking all morning about the South Carolina baseball team and their amazing regional going 3-0 and punching their ticket to a super. How are you feeling about what we saw this weekend?
Yeah, Tyler, what's up, man? Hope you're doing well today. I'll tell you what, as South Carolina was closing that thing out yesterday, and you just had a packed house at Founders Park, electric atmosphere all weekend, it kind of reminded me of what Gamecock baseball, used to be like. And I grew up in the state of South Carolina. I grew up, I was kind of in high school during Ray Tanner's first run, where they went to Omaha 3 straight times in like the early 2000s, right at the turn of the century. And then, of course, they had the big 3 at the end of Ray Tanner's, time at South Carolina as well. But that when people think about South Carolina baseball, especially in this state, what we saw on Saturday night, on Sunday night is sort of this what I think of, with South Carolina baseball. And this is a team or a program that's used to being in the postseason, used to being in big matchups. And, I just thought, Tyler, they played 3 straight, just very well-played games. And they were up to the challenge. They were up to the atmosphere. And, kudos to Mark Kingston for sort of weathering the storm and landing the plane, as he said.
Yeah, and Kingston talked about this, that they were doing their best to try and ignore the noise, but it's almost impossible to tune all that stuff out. Because, again, we live in an age today where even if you don't get on Twitter or Facebook or whatever it is, people are still telling you or sending you text messages or screenshots saying, hey, here's what so-and-so said about you, here's what they think you're going to do, and so on and so forth. And, the entire narrative around this team going into the regional was, are they even good enough to host a regional? Look what they did over the course of the last month, 5-13, and they're not the same team they were at the beginning of the season. And just starting with Friday night, picking up that 19-1 victory over Central Connecticut State, they went out there and proved why they are, in the eyes of the NCAA selection committee, one of the best 16 teams in the country.
Yeah, and I don't think it could have started much better for South Carolina. That was I think a good matchup for them on Friday, where these were some pitchers that I think obviously struggled to find the zone for Central Connecticut. And this is an offense for South Carolina. They've been at their best when they have been able to work counts, take their walks, take their hit by pitches, and then, of course, make teams pay. And that was obviously what they did. And I think, it's kind of like, and I believe I'm stealing this from Mark Kingston. I can't remember when he said it. I think it was on one of the pregame shows with Derek Scott. It's kind of like a shooter in basketball just wants to see the ball go through the rim, and I think with South Carolina, they really just all of a sudden probably were like, okay, that's us. That's who we were for a good part of the year, and what they did against Central Connecticut State. And then they were able to just carry that on over. Obviously, NC State, I think, pitched a little bit better than those other two teams, so that was a little bit more of a low-scoring game going into Saturday. But, I remember, Tyler, earlier in the year, I'm sure most people do as well, this was a South Carolina team that against these lesser opponents, they were just hammering midweek teams. And so Central Connecticut State, obviously, nothing against them, no offense to them. They obviously were a tournament team. But to me, looking at what they had on the mound, this is a team South Carolina should have been able to do that to. And just going out there and doing what they did early in the year, I think really gave them some momentum going into the rest of the week. And I thought it was very interesting, too, Tyler, Kingston's comments about going back and looking at the box scores from, like the Florida weekend and even before that, and just doing everything he could to sort of recreate exactly what they were doing back then.
And that Florida series was kind of the turning point afterwards. South Carolina sweeps the Gators and then has that, midweek game off. And then, going back, it was 5-13 down the stretch that culminated with them getting bounced by Texas A&M in the SEC tournament. But that led to this 8 days off leading up into playing on Friday against Central Connecticut State. And we knew that those 8 days were going to be beneficial from a health standpoint, getting guys back to as close to 100% as possible. We certainly saw that with the lineup over the course of the weekend, but also from getting back to the basics, as Kingston said, of those hitting mechanics. And Colin was out there at practice on either Wednesday or Thursday last week, and he talked about seeing, those quick and short swings, just in practice, as opposed to the long and slower swings that he had seen over the course of the past month in those games when they were losing more often than not. And again, like you said, you were supposed to go out there and beat Central Connecticut State in the manner that you did, but from a confidence standpoint, that showed them that, hey, this offense, we can do this. We're back on track.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And I think it's almost, it went so well for South Carolina this week at the plate. It's almost hard to even single out one guy. Like, I was kind of trying to think about what I was going to talk about here. And I was going to say, well, Braylon Wimmer and him sort of being who he was this weekend. He's sort of the guy that stirs the drink for South Carolina. And I still think that's the case. But then look at what Gavin Casas did. Columbia Regional MVP. He was 6 for 13, scored 6 runs, 2 doubles, 6 RBIs. And then you think back to what Casas was doing when this team was really rolling. Obviously when he's hitting the way he did, I thought his approach at the plate was as good as I have seen it, Tyler. He wasn't necessarily going out there trying to just hit the ball over Williams Street. He went out there, hit the ball to the opposite field, stayed up the middle at times, and really I thought just kind of had a great mindset at the plate. But then, look off the top, James Hicks gives you a great start. Look at, Ethan Petrie had a decent weekend. And, I think if you just look at Will McGillis and adding him back into the lineup as well, that to me, if this team keeps on this run, the fact that McGillis and the way Kingston described it, they kept just waiting for him to see the ball pop off his bat the way it was earlier in the year. And in practice, it just was not happening. And then I think literally leading into, this week, it was kind of like that looks like Will McGillis. That looks like the guy from earlier this year. And he was such a spark for them at the top of this lineup. And, we've talked about this before, and I'm sure Colin has expressed this, Tyler, on one of his many spreadsheets that he has. But that leadoff spot, the guys in that spot just have not performed well. And even, you throw some of your better hitters in there, just literally when they are leading off the game, it has not gone that well this year. So McGillis, plugging him in as the leadoff guy, he can hit the ball to all fields. He can hit the ball out of the park, has some swag, starts the game off right. I think that's going to be huge for this team as well.
Yeah, absolutely. McGillis, great weekend, went 5 for 13 with 5 RBIs, including 2 home runs, one of those coming in last night's game as well. And looking at this offense, scored 41 runs over the course of the entire 3 games over this weekend. And as I talked about with Colin earlier, you have to go back a full month for them to score a total of 41 runs, going all the way back to the Kentucky series. So again, it's offense back on the right track. And when you look at what this team was doing earlier on in the season, hitting for power, home runs left and right, Petrie hitting a home run seemingly every time he came up to the plate, that wasn't what scored them the runs this week, and only 10 of their runs came off of the 5 home runs they hit this weekend. So 75% of these runs came off of small ball situations, drawing walks, singles, doubles, those kind of things. And when you talk about going really, really deep in the postseason, trying to make a run at Omaha, those are the runs that become of vital importance, not the ones hitting for power usually.
Yeah, and I thought it was just a perfect combination, Tyler, of small ball and then also making them pay. There were several times that, how often do you see a team when an opponent is struggling to throw strikes and, maybe a team walks 2 or 3 guys in an inning, but then the team at the plate just is not ever able to actually make them pay. I thought the thing that was so impressive for South Carolina this week is that they took their walks, they took their hit by pitches, but then they really, when they had opportunities, they did damage as well. So I thought it was a great just combination of taking what was there, but then when they had their opponents on the ropes, they really made them pay for it. And sometimes that was a long ball. Sometimes that was getting a big single with runners on base. Sometimes that was, Casas hitting a double with runners on base. It was really from top to bottom. Even the guys, and I don't have Will Tippett's, stats in front of me, but even the guys who didn't have massive weekends statistically, you have guys moving runners over, sacrifice flies. Really top to bottom. I felt like this lineup, for the most part, looked about like what they were for a good part of the year. And, I think if you're a Gamecock fan, there's reason to be excited. Florida's having to battle their way through their regional. We'll find out a little bit later today who South Carolina's opponent's going to be. But, hey, this thing sets up pretty well for them at this point, Tyler. I thought getting, James Hicks going 2 straight great starts, what you saw to Will Sanders from the pen as well, I think, is very encouraging. And, I think just top to bottom, there's really very little you can look at from this weekend and, pick apart. There's really nothing negative to take from this. It was kind of exactly what you thought. They, the Campbell game felt like it could be one of those games where maybe it was going to be one of these, crazy 16-15 type games. But even after Campbell sort of struck back, it felt like South Carolina just kept adding on and sort of, obviously Campbell didn't. So it was one of those games for me, Tyler. It felt like South Carolina was in control.
Yep.
But even though they were up by 4, 5, 6, 7, you were always sort of waiting to see if Campbell could have another big inning. And, after they had that 3-run bomb, to cut it to, I guess it would have been 7-5 at that point. Carolina really just locked them down from that point forward.
Yeah, in fact, the only time Carolina trailed the entire weekend was when Campbell jumped up on them 2-0 in that first inning. South Carolina would tie the game with 2 in the second themselves. You mentioned Will Tippett, and he did end up going 1 for 9 over the course of the entire weekend, but he did have those 3 RBIs, like you said, working counts, moving guys over, ground outs, sacrifices, those kind of things. So even statistically, from an average standpoint, not the best weekend, still, being a vital part of this offense and getting guys across the plate for Will Tippett.
Yeah, and that's I think we've known all year long, man, if South Carolina's getting what they got out of the top of their order and then even the middle part of the order, if Tippett can just have good at-bats and the guys sort of at the bottom of the order can have productive at-bats, then you're completely okay with that, especially, with Casas. I thought Casas really kind of scuffled for about a month there, didn't quite look like the guy we were used to seeing. I thought that was maybe the most encouraging thing from this whole weekend as far as the different guys' plate approaches and how they look now compared to the final month of the season. So, I mean, again, I don't think there's anything to nitpick from this weekend. Everything came up aces for South Carolina, and kudos to the staff for, I feel like they kind of just hit the reset button. It's a cliche that it's a new season when you go into postseason play, but this certainly looked like a team who was taking the approach that this is a brand new season.
You mentioned Will Sanders a moment ago. Coming up next, we'll dive into a little bit more of his performance over the weekend and what that can mean for him going forward. You were listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
107.5 The Game.
You hear us tell you about it every single day on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Firehouse Subs is not only our presenting sponsor, but also they have a sub of the day every single day, $7.99 for a medium, $5.99 for a small. Monday's sub of the day is the Meatball Sub. It's Meatball Monday. Go to FirehouseSubs.com, hit the Rapid Rescue, order online, or you can get the app. They'll have it waiting on you right there on the shelf. They'll have your chips in the bag, and everything will just be efficiently put up there for you to go in, grab it, kind of enjoy your lunch without having to wait in line. Also, they have the smoking triple stacks, 3 meats, 1 epic sub. Hit up our friends, Firehouse Subs, FirehouseSubs.com, and the Firehouse Subs app.
All right, up next, talk a little bit more about Will Sanders on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, 107.5.
HIV is not a crime, or it shouldn't be.
We are well past the days of concern over a hug, a scraped knee, or a sneeze.
Thanks to scientific advancements, stigma prevention work, and activists like Elizabeth Taylor,
people living with HIV can do and live fully healthy lives
without risk or fear of transmitting the virus to others.
But a different fear remains.
The fear of prosecution simply for living with HIV.
In 30 states, Americans are being imprisoned due to their HIV status,
even when there is zero risk of transmission.
And when HIV is undetectable, it's untransmissible.
It's time for the laws to catch up to science.
HIV is not a death sentence nor a deadly weapon.
And it shouldn't be a crime either.
Join the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation in the fight to modernize outdated HIV criminalization laws. Go to etaf.org. HIV is not a crime. Campaign funded through the support of Gilead Sciences Incorporated.
Michael J. for Hope for the Warriors. Started back in 2006 at Camp Lejeune. Military families witnessing the effects of war on their loved ones. Now, almost 20 years later, they've aided over 53,000 service members, veterans, and families with confidential, high-quality behavioral health care services at little or no cost to post-9/11 vets and their families. Over 91% of every dollar donated goes directly to the programs. If you're as concerned about our heroes as I am, go to hopeforthewarriors.org.
Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
Pop up left field. Dylan Brewer says, I've got it. He waits. He squeezes. That will do it. You can put Spurs on a regional championship. South Carolina defeats Campbell 16-7. They go 3-0 and finish off the field here at Founders Park.
Derek Scott on the call for the Gamecocks Radio Network, or the final out of last night's game of South Carolina picking up the 16-7 win over Campbell. Welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game. Brewer came down with the catch for the final out, but it was Will Sanders on the mound for the Gamecocks over the course of those final 3 innings. And Wes, you brought up Will a few moments ago before we went to the break there, a guy that's had such an up and down season, and we knew he was going to have a bullpen role going into this weekend. Comes in on Friday night, does 1 inning, gets 2 strikeouts against Central Connecticut State, comes in again last night, as I said, works the final 3 innings, gets the 6 strikeouts, and only gives up 1 hit and 1 walk over the course of those 4 combined innings this weekend. And I get it. It's a no-pressure situation when you come into both those games, having the leads that South Carolina had. But I can't think of a better scenario for a guy like Will Sanders to come in and get his confidence level back up. And we saw that in his emotion each time he left the mound, going back to the dugout, especially last night.
Yeah, Tyler, he looked like a guy who kind of had something to prove, I felt like. And, you know, he was obviously out there throwing the ball with confidence, and he sort of wanted to go right at the Campbell hitters. I thought, you know, on Friday, that game was completely out of hand, but it was just an opportunity there for him to basically get what essentially was a live bullpen and kind of let him ease his way back in. And then I think we all knew at that point that he was probably going to be used. He was probably going to be needed at some point during this regional. And you just kind of wondered when that would be and, you know, what that would look like. Would that be an inning here? Would that be a like high leverage situation or not? And, you know, if you look at what this team for Campbell did, you know, through the 6th inning, Tyler, I mean, they had scored 7 runs, and then Will Sanders comes in and just locks them down for the final 3. So I thought that was very encouraging, man. You know, long term, I think he'll go back to the drawing board. You know, I think Sanders is a guy, as far as his pro career, you know, probably is more of a starter. But right now, if he's got 2 pitches going, sort of that breaking ball and that fastball, and he can come in and just throw at maximum effort, this down the stretch, you know, going into next week, going into this super, this might be his role for South Carolina. Because obviously, you know, regionals are so different, man. For Carolina, you ended up just needing the 3 games. But, you know, there could have been a scenario there where if South Carolina would have lost one of the early games and had to come out of the loser's bracket, where maybe he's having to start, there could be a scenario, you know, this team gets to Omaha where he has to start a game. But for next week, the beauty of the super regional is that you know what it looks like. You know exactly how many games you have. It's a best of 3. That's the same thing you've played all year long in SEC plays. You know, who can win 2 out of the 3 games? And so for South Carolina, having Sanders potentially available to just come in and maybe chop off 3 innings at the end of a game, I think that's something that could be very valuable for them going into next week. I thought Hicks really solidified a starting spot. You know what you have with Mahoney. I think you probably, if it were to go 3 games next week, you probably have a decision to make on your 3rd starter. But I think Will Sanders in that role, that could be the ticket for him and for Carolina moving forward, at least, you know, to finish out this season.
And I agree with you. No reason to slot Sanders back into the starting rotation for the Super Regional for this weekend. But given how well he's pitched against Florida in the past, especially earlier on the season where, you know, he helped South Carolina pick up that 13-3 run rule game on that Friday night start, one of his last really good starts of the entire season. You think it's even maybe at least a conversation going on with the pitching staff of potentially having him as an idea for this weekend?
You know, that actually is a really, really good point, Tyler. That was probably, I don't have it in front of me, that was probably his best start of the year, wasn't it? Definitely one of his best starts against Florida.
Absolutely.
Before. So, yeah, I think you're probably looking at either, can he, you know, Kingston likes to use the word weapon. Can he be a weapon? Is this a guy that can maybe he affects 2 games for you? You know, maybe he pitches out of the bullpen in game 1 and in game 3 potentially. You know, I could see a scenario where if he hadn't pitched much going into a game 3, that you could actually make that case to start him. But also I think it's hard to see it playing out without him being needed in one of those first 2 games. Like I would think there would be an opportunity to get to him. I just look at him as a guy right now who you can kind of say, all right, you don't have to go through this lineup a second time. It seems like in baseball, it used to be, more about, it still is about pitch count, but now everybody talks about how many times have you been through the lineup. Is this your first time facing these guys, second time, third time? And obviously those batting averages and OPS and all the stats reflect that, going through a lineup second and third time, advantage to the offense. So I think for Will Sanders, if I could slot him as a guy who could maybe give me 3 innings for one of those 3 games and then maybe give an inning or 2 for the other, you're almost kind of piecing it together a little bit. But that is a good point, man. I mean, if it were to just so happen to play out that Carolina were to, let's say they win game 1, and we're assuming it's Florida. Florida,
right.
This thing may be this thing may be in Columbia, and
Sure.
it may be Texas Tech. So, but if it is Florida, if for some reason you were to go through the first 2 games, which I really don't see happening, but if you were to somehow, let's say they won game 1 without needing him, and then lost game 2, and it was one of those games where it was out of hand, so you didn't want to burn your best guys. If he's sitting there having not thrown going into a game 3, I do think you got an excellent point there, man. Maybe you roll Sanders out there and just say it's going to be a short leash regardless, but let's go ahead and start the game off right,
Right. Now, the hope would obviously be that, you go into this weekend, if it is Florida, and you have Hicks on Friday, you have Mahoney on Saturday, as you've been doing, or whatever it ends up being, Saturday, Sunday, however the schedule ends up working out, and you win those first 2 games, you don't even have to worry about having somebody to start for that third game because it's a moot point. But like you said, as we were talking about it, it's at least a potential idea on the table. Not to say that they're going to do that, but it's an option if it's there, just given his familiarity and success against this lineup in the past.
Yeah, it's good to have that option, Tyler. I mean, you really didn't get the season out of Will Sanders, and I'm sure the staff thought they would get, and that I'm sure Will Sanders thought he would be able to provide. So seeing him throw the way he did over the weekend and him being an option, even if it's not the option you thought it was going to be coming in, I think, it actually is sort of almost miraculous that they have been able to do what they've done this year. Like, I get all the negativity from the run where they were really struggling, but when you look at the fact that your ace, like your true ace, your guy that was supposed to be your dude, Tyler, was really not your dude this year, and Will Sanders, and then Noah Hall, who sort of had taken on that role and was your best pitcher, missed most of the season. The fact they've been able to get to where they are actually is it's quite impressive. So now you have Sanders at the very least. It's not the role you thought it would be,
right?
But at least you have him in a position to help make an impact.
Speaking of that super regional, it is Florida and Texas Tech taking on each other today at noon. You can see that game on ESPN. Who would you rather face? We'll talk about that next. The Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
If you are looking for that perfect gift for someone, like I've been telling you all for the last month as well, if you have a graduate in your family, in your life, and you want to get that brand new diploma framed up, give our friends over at Goldline Framing a call, 803-739-1337. It's right across the river in West Columbia. That's 511 12th Street. Again, West Columbia, South Carolina, right across the road from that big cone in the sky over there at Zesto's. 803-739-1337. Open Tuesday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and then Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again, from diplomas to original artwork to canvases, jerseys, and flags, they can help you with all of your custom framing needs. Also have a great art gallery along with home decor, furniture, and gift items in store. Again, that's our friends at Goldline Framing. That's West Columbia, South Carolina, 803-739-1337.
Options for the Super Regional. Who would you rather face? Coming up next on Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Said by Firehouse Subs on.
Reading is fundamental. The nation's largest children's literacy organization invites you to rally our children to read. Visit rallytoread.org and help your child pledge to read 100 books by Read Across America Day in March 2022. Also, watch well-known authors read their favorite books. Find activities to keep young readers motivated, and teachers can enter the Rally to Read sweepstakes for a chance to win 100 books for their own school, subject to rules. Inspire your child to read. Visit rallytoread.org today.
Earn great returns on your money with the safety and security of a community bank. Bank of Clark is offering 4.5% annual percentage yield on 6-month CDs, 4.75% APY on 12-month CDs and IRAs, and 5% APY on 15 and 18-month CDs. Plus, earn up to 3% APY on Bank of Clark money market accounts. Visit your local Bank of Clark branch today or go to bankofclark.bank. We're the bank for that. Member FDIC. Limited time offer. Rate subject to change at any time. Minimum balance of $1,000 on CDs. On MMAs, minimum of $1,000 to open, $25,000 to earn interest. Balance of $100,000 to obtain the 3%.
107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
There's a shot down the right field line. It's going to hunt. It's going to hunt to the corner. One is in. Two is in. They're going to be at the corners with 2 outs. What a clutch hit from Gavin Costas. We said it today. We said it last night. What a relief watching him swing the bat like he did a couple of months ago.
He is locked in right now. Every at-bat for 2 days has resulted in solid contact, and that was a smoke base hit.
Tommy Moody, Derek Scott on the call for the Gamecocks radio network. That was Gavin Cassis getting RBI against NC State in Saturday's game. One of 6 RBIs that he had over the course of the weekend, where he went 6 for 13 at the plate. Welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you. And obviously, great weekend for South Carolina. And they now turn their attention to a super regional, waiting to see who their opponent's going to be. Again, Florida and Texas Tech down in Gainesville coming up at noon on ESPNU. And it's kind of a little bit of a toss-up who you would rather face. Obviously, getting Texas Tech means you would be playing at home, but this is a Texas Tech team that's played a lot of good baseball as of late. They've beaten the likes of UConn, already beaten Florida once. They beat Oklahoma and West Virginia in the Big 12 championship game, lost a tight one to Oklahoma State, a team that hosted a regional themselves. But on the flip side of things, yeah, you'd be going down to Gainesville, but this is a Florida team that you already swept earlier on in the season.
Yeah, I still lean towards the opportunity to have a super regional here in Columbia, Tyler. Those were 3 great atmospheres over the weekend, and to be able to pack Founders Park, 2 or 3 more times, I think would be really cool for the program, really cool for the fans, and that would kind of be my tiebreaker. Obviously, like you pointed out there, Texas Tech. This would not be some guaranteed trip to Omaha for South Carolina. They would have to keep playing well and keep doing all the things they did this past weekend if they're going to beat this team. Obviously, they have been really, really good down the stretch. But Florida, obviously, we know what they can do. I know South Carolina swept them earlier this year, but they're probably going to be out for blood and out for revenge. Going down there it's a pretty difficult place to play. So it would be, I will say this, I think if you could guarantee that South Carolina would win the thing, maybe there are some fans out there that would love to go to Omaha by going through Florida.
Sure.
I think there's some fans that would think that'd be pretty fun. But, man, the chance to do it at home and the chance to celebrate on your home field and to have, a few more great atmospheres, I don't think you can turn that down.
Again, Florida and Texas Tech coming up today at noon on ESPNU to decide who and where South Carolina is going to be playing this upcoming weekend in the Super Regional. Taking a look around the country at some of the other Super Regionals, obviously the SEC had a lot of hosts going into this weekend. A couple of surprises, though, of teams not making out of their own regional, those being Vandy and Auburn.
Yeah, man, and I think it just goes to show you, Tyler, I mean, there's a lot of good teams around the country. There's a lot of parity in college baseball. Just because you're hosting, just because you had a great year, there are no guarantees that you're going to be able to get out of a regional. And, you know, the way these regionals are set up, and, you know, I know they've been set up this way for a long time, but, man, if you've got to play good ball those first two games because, you know, starting 2-0 is such a big advantage. You know, just the way these regionals are structured. And if you lose one of those first two and have to come out of the losers bracket, even if you're a really good team, even if you, you know, are a team that's built to do it or a team that has a lot of pitching, it can be very difficult to do, man. I think the stat coming into this year was that 81% of teams that start out 2-0 go on to win their regionals. So, you know, it's just difficult in baseball. You know, as you know, man, it's such a game that there's some luck involved. You know, you don't want to put your season in the hands of fate and whether or not a dribbler to the left side sneaks through past the shortstop or doesn't. You know, this is a game where you want to take the luck out of it by sort of staying in command. It's kind of like poker. Sometimes it's more about percentages than anything. So for South Carolina, just the way they took care of business obviously was nice. And you're seeing some of these other teams, I mean, obviously Gamecock fans took quite a bit of joy in watching Clemson lose. And, you know, I sat there and watched a good bit of the final, I guess, ninth inning on of that Clemson-Tennessee game. And you're sitting there going, whoever wins this game probably is going to win the regional because whoever loses it is going to have to turn right back around, get up, play an early game tomorrow, and then, you know, win another game and then another game. So it was going to be very, very difficult on whoever lost that game once it went as deep as it did. But I'll tell you what, the other thing that just has caught my attention, Tyler, how about some of the individual performances out there? The kid for TCU hitting 2 grand slams in the first 2 innings of a game.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Jack Haglione as well out there with Florida. Again, a team that you might have to face this weekend, firing on all cylinders down there for the Gators. So, yeah, a lot of great performances this weekend. You know, you mentioned Clemson and Tennessee. They went 14 innings on Saturday night, and like you said, Clemson losing that game had to turn around and play Charlotte early on Sunday morning, or early in Sunday afternoon, losing that game 2-3, and then Tennessee took care of Charlotte 9-2 to advance out of that regional themselves.
Yeah, that Tennessee-Clemson game, though, may be one of the best games we've seen all year long. Had a little bit of everything, had some drama, obviously, had some drama of all kinds, had some instant replays, had some umpires wanting to steal the show a little bit. But, yeah, man, it's been a really, really good weekend for the regionals and for college baseball in terms of there being upsets, exciting games, and, you know, really just a little bit of everything. And I think it sets up for us to have some really, really exciting supers to watch next week as well. But, you know, should be some decent games today, I think, in terms of these teams fighting it out, trying to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Plenty of games going on today. Of course, Florida and Texas Tech, as I've mentioned. A couple of SEC teams, LSU and Arkansas playing some doubleheaders. LSU going to be taking on Oregon State at noon, at 2 o'clock and 6, and then Arkansas and TCU playing games at 3 and 9 o'clock. Those regionals moved around a little bit because of weather, but plenty of other teams got Duke and Coastal Carolina, Indiana and Kentucky, Texas A&M and Stanford. So plenty of baseball to watch over the course of the day as we find out who's going to be in the Supers coming up next weekend. Up next, closing out today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Not only was it a great weekend for baseball, it was a great weekend on the recruiting front as well, as a couple of key visitors made their way to Columbia looking to potentially be Gamecocks in the future. Talk about that next on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
All right, any parents out there like me, you know you would do absolutely anything for your kids, and that's why it's so important to protect them with life insurance from State Farm. State Farm agent Amy Mason-Cup will help make it easy and affordable to help you protect your kids, your family, no matter what the future holds, because For the people you do anything for, life insurance could mean everything. Call State Farm agent Amy Mason Cup in the Midlands today, 803-772-5554. Let her help your family just like she helped mine. Amy's a South Carolina native and a local agent, and she and her team can give you a personalized quote on life insurance to protect your kids, protect your family, help meet your needs, and help you save. Again, a local agent, Amy Mason Cup, State Farm. Her office is right off of I-26, 612 St. Andrews Road, Suite 4 in Columbia. You can visit her website for more information, amymasoncup.com. Again, that's State Farm agent Amy Mason Cup. Life insurance to protect your kids and your family, 803-772-5554, or amymasoncup.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head and Wes Mitchell along with you on this Monday morning. And Wes, I was talking with Chris on Friday as he was out at the first of the Shane Beamer football camps for this summer and gave us a lot of insight into what was going on out there. That was kind of the start of the weekend, as there were a lot of visitors here for Gamecock football from a recruiting standpoint. And from what I've been reading from you guys on GamecockCentral.com, a lot of good things said about this program from these guys that were in town.
Yeah, Tyler, for those who don't really follow recruiting closely out there, June has just become a huge month in recruiting. That's when a lot of these guys take their official visits, and then obviously that's when South Carolina and schools around the country host prospects for their camps as well, 10 camp days in June. But, yeah, as far as the official visitors go this weekend, South Carolina hosted 6 guys, all uncommitted. We've actually, for those who are subscribers on Gamecock Central, we've talked to 4 of them at this point, working on getting some feedback from the final 2. But, half of these guys were 4-star guys, half of these guys were 3-star prospects, and it really sounded like, not that this is a surprise, because generally official visits almost always go well. Went well with all 6 guys. From what we've heard, and certainly the 4 we talked to gave very, very positive reactions. And I think Carolina really made some big moves here. Lewis Solomon, he's a 4-star athlete out of Georgia, and South Carolina wants him as a defensive back. This has kind of become a South Carolina-Florida State battle, and he actually told us that after this weekend that South Carolina is out front right now. He's still got his Florida State official visit coming up in a few weeks, so that'll be something to monitor. Parker Livingstone is a 4-star receiver out of Texas, and it was going to be very difficult coming in to beat out the University of Texas. I think that's kind of been the leader here, but this was his first visit to South Carolina, and I think really opened his eyes to the program. So that's something to keep an eye on there. And then an intriguing guy is Braylon Russell. He's a 4-star running back out of Arkansas. Interestingly enough, he was committed to Arkansas at one point, and one of his recruiters there was actually Dow Loggins. So he was committed there. He decommitted a while back. He's sort of going through the process now. This was his first ever visit to South Carolina as well, and just really, really gave strong reviews, and I think understands that there's a chance to play at South Carolina. This is this guy would really fit what they want to do. About 6'1", 235 pounds, so a true big back, Tyler.
And obviously you said June, a very, very important month for getting these guys on campus, and we've talked about it. They've kind of split things up a little bit differently this year with how they're handling the on-campus visits for the month of June.
Yeah, they have. So basically last year you had 2 big June official visit weekends, and then there were some guys rolling in just sort of whenever it worked out, like they were doing, if a guy could only come in the midweek, you just sort of make it work. Well, this year they have spread it out a little bit more. There are 3 big official visit weekends. South Carolina obviously just had one. They're going to have another this upcoming weekend. That would be June 9th. And then they don't have the weekend off, but that next weekend is not a big weekend. And then June 23rd, which actually, even though that's not the last weekend of June, that is the last weekend that you can host visitors on the recruiting calendar. So that final weekend of official visits will be a huge weekend. Like they'll probably have the most that they have at any point this year during that June 23rd weekend. Many of the guys actually that are committed to South Carolina will be in for that weekend, and then they will strategically have some top uncommitted guys. You look at your Daniel Hills of the world, your Dylan Stewarts of the world, Jonathan Paylor, all 4-star, highly regarded prospects, all guys that South Carolina really, really wants. And so they'll again strategically have them in the same weekend that South Carolina is going to have in pretty much their entire committed class in town.
All right, we'll continue to keep our eye on that and obviously watch what happens between Florida and Texas Tech. First pitch coming up in just a couple of minutes over on ESPNU to see who South Carolina ends up taking on in the Super Regional this weekend. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Wes, hope to see you in studio tomorrow. Tyler Head, coming up next is the halftime show with Jay and Terry here on 107.5 The Game.
My whole identity had been wrapped up in being a soldier. To have that so violently ripped from me when I was wounded, I was lost for a very long time. When Wounded Warrior Project came into my life, being around the other warriors, people that had similar experiences that I did, it was a game changer for me. Having King join the group, that was the beginning of a really good friendship. It's a good time.
I first heard about Wounded Warrior Project through CQ. And at first I was kind of like, I don't know if I qualify. But having been a part of it, it's kind of taught me that it's not just the wounds that you can see, but it's those that you can't.
When you do something like a peer support group with Wounded Warrior Project and come together from different walks of life, man, the growth is incredible. If not for Wounded Warrior Project, I really don't think that I'd be here today.
See how we help warriors combat stigma at woundedwarriorproject.org/combat stigma.